Imagine this. You finally retire at 65. You did everything right. You saved consistently. You avoided risky bets. You trusted the system. Your account shows what looks like a comfortable number. Enough to live peacefully. Enough to rest. Enough to finally breathe. But 5 years later, that same number feels smaller. 10 years later, it feels tight. 15 years later, it feels dangerous. Here's the mystery. How can your savings stay the same, yet your lifestyle collapses? No market crash. No bad investment. No sudden disaster. Just time. Because there is a silent force that doesn't steal your money directly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't break into your account. It slowly erases purchasing power year after year until retirement becomes survival. That force is inflation. And today, you're going to see how inflation doesn't just raise prices. It quietly dismantles retirement plans, destroys long-term savings, and reshapes the future of aging itself. But to understand how this happens, we need to go backward, not to retirement, but to the system that made retirement fragile in the first place. Retirement, as we know it, is a modern invention. For most of human history, people didn't retire. They worked until they couldn't. Families supported elders. Communities absorbed the cost. Then industrialization changed everything. Factories needed younger labor. Governments needed predictable populations. Corporations needed orderly workforces. So the idea of retirement was introduced not as freedom, but as management. Pension systems emerged. Social safety nets formed. The promise was simple: work hard for decades, save money, retire with dignity. But this promise had one massive assumption baked into it. One that almost nobody questioned at the time. It assumed that money would hold its value. That assumption turned out to be dangerously wrong. Because while retirement planning focused on how much to save, inflation focused on how fast money loses meaning. And this is where the real story begins. Before modern inflation, money was tied to physical limits: gold, silver, commodity-backed currencies. Governments couldn't easily create more without consequences. But in the 20th century, this changed. Paper money replaced metal. Then currencies detached from gold completely. Central banks gained the power to create money digitally. Governments gained the ability to finance spending through debt instead of taxes. This unlocked growth but also introduced a permanent side effect: continuous inflation. At first, inflation was small, barely noticeable, 1 or 2% per year. It sounded harmless. But here's the problem. Inflation doesn't hurt immediately. It hurts over time. At 2% inflation, your money loses about 18% of purchasing power in 10 years, about 33% in 20 years, over 45% in 30 years. That means someone who saves for retirement for 40 years is fighting an invisible enemy the entire time, whether they realize it or not. And retirees, they are hit the hardest. Because while workers can increase income, retirees live on fixed savings. That's when inflation stops being a background number and becomes a lifestyle killer. As inflation became permanent, retirement systems adapted but poorly. Pensions promised fixed payouts. Savings accounts offered safe interest. Bonds became the foundation of conservative retirement portfolios. On paper, everything looked stable, but in reality, inflation quietly began to outpace safety. Interest rates often failed to beat inflation. Pensions adjusted slowly or not at all. Savings accounts paid returns lower than rising costs. This created what economists call negative real returns, when your money grows in numbers but shrinks in purchasing power. Example: if your savings earn 3% interest but inflation is 5%, you didn't grow wealth. You lost 2% in real value silently. Multiply this effect across decades of retirement, and the damage compounds. This is how retirees end up with enough money on paper, but not enough life in reality. And then something even worse happened. Inflation doesn't move smoothly. It comes in waves. Wars, energy crises, pandemics, supply shocks, debt explosions, money printing. Each wave hits retirees harder than workers. Why? Because workers can adapt, change jobs, ask for raises, increase hours, develop skills retirees cannot. They depend on fixed pensions, withdrawals from savings, government benefits adjusted to slowly when inflation spikes. Retirees experience immediate purchasing power collapse. Food rises first, energy follows, rent increases, healthcare explodes. These are not optional expenses, so retirees are forced into survival mode, cutting medication, skipping heating or cooling, reducing nutrition, selling assets early, returning to work. This is not theoretical, it's structural. Inflation doesn't just shrink money, it reshapes behavior. It forces financial decisions that permanently weaken retirement stability. And once savings start draining faster than planned, the spiral begins. Here's the most dangerous part. Inflation damage is rarely dramatic. It's gradual, quiet, psychological. At first, retirees adjust spending slightly. Then they downgrade lifestyles. Then they cut essentials. Then they panic. By the time the problem is obvious, the options are limited. This creates a new reality. Retirement is no longer a finish line. It becomes a financial entrance test. People plan to retire at 65 with enough money for 20 years. Inflation stretches costs so aggressively that savings run out by 75. Now imagine living longer, which modern medicine has made common. Longer life plus inflation equals extended financial vulnerability. This is why millions of retirees around the world are quietly re-entering the workforce, not for purpose, not for passion, for survival. And this leads to the final illusion, the idea that the system will fix it, which brings us to the most dangerous belief of all. Governments respond to inflation with interest rate changes. Central banks claim to control inflation. Pension systems promise adjustments. But these fixes rarely protect retirees fully. Why? Because inflation is not just monetary, it's structural. Debt-based economies require continuous expansion. Governments rely on money creation. Asset markets inflate faster than wages. Living costs rise faster than benefit adjustments. Even when inflation comes down, prices rarely fall back. They stabilize at higher levels, meaning retirees never recover lost purchasing power. Once inflation takes value away, it's gone. And this is the uncomfortable truth most retirement plans ignore. Now let's bring this story into the present. Because inflation destroying retirement savings isn't a future threat. It's happening right now, quietly, structurally, and globally, across developed and developing economies. The same pattern keeps repeating. Wages rise slowly, asset prices surge. Living costs climb faster than official inflation numbers. Retirement accounts grow on paper but shrink in real value. This creates what many retirees experience as phantom wealth. Your account balance looks bigger, but your grocery bill, medical costs, insurance premiums, rent, utilities, and transportation say otherwise. And here's the uncomfortable part. Retirement systems were never designed for sustained inflation combined with longer life expectancy and economic instability. They were built for short retirements, stable prices, and strong population growth. That world no longer exists. Consider this, over long periods. Even moderate inflation destroys massive amounts of purchasing power. A retiree living on fixed withdrawals loses real income every single year. Inflation remains above their portfolio's real return. This means a 4% withdrawal rate becomes unsafe under higher inflation. Conservative, bond-heavy portfolios fail to protect purchasing power. Cash savings become value traps. Pension adjustments lag behind real expenses. Healthcare is the worst offender. Medical costs often rise faster than general inflation. Retirees face higher premiums, copays, long-term care costs, and medication expenses precisely when income flexibility disappears. So inflation doesn't just reduce comfort. It targets the most unavoidable expenses first. That's not coincidence. That's structural vulnerability. Let's break down the chain reaction. 1. Central banks expand money supply. 2. Stabilize economies. 2. Asset prices inflate faster than wages. 3. Living costs rise. 4. Interest rates fluctuate, damaging bond-heavy retirement portfolios. 5. Fixed income retirees fall behind. 6. Withdrawals increase to maintain lifestyle. 7. Savings drain faster. 8. Longevity risk grows. 9. Financial stress accelerates. This cycle feeds itself. Once retirees increase withdrawals to keep up with inflation, they reduce future compounding. That means less growth potential, which means even more vulnerability to future inflation. It's a slow-motion squeeze, and most retirement calculators don't model this realistically. They assume stable inflation, stable returns, stable behavior. Reality is not stable. One of the most dangerous effects of inflation is psychological. People focus on nominal numbers. I have 1 million saved. My pension pays monthly. My account is growing. But inflation makes those statements meaningless without context. What matters is not how much money you have, but how much life it buys. Inflation separates these two realities. This is why many retirees don't realize they're in trouble until it's too late. They feel safe while their purchasing power erodes. By the time the danger becomes obvious, they are already financially constrained. When retirees feel inflation pressure, they often turn to familiar solutions. Most of them fail. Point 1. Holding more cash. Cash feels safe. But inflation turns cash into a melting asset. The longer you hold it, the less it buys. 2. Over-reliance on bonds. Bonds protect against volatility, not inflation. Rising interest rates crush bond values, while inflation eats fixed payouts. 3. Cutting spending alone. You can only cut so much. Essentials don't disappear. Healthcare doesn't become optional. Energy doesn't get cheaper because you want it to. 4. Trusting government adjustments. Cost of living increases often lag real expenses. They're based on averaged inflation baskets that don't reflect retiree spending patterns. Each of these responses treats symptoms, not the disease. Modern retirement planning assumes stable currency value, predictable inflation, consistent market returns, shorter retirements, strong social safety nets. Every one of these assumptions is weakening. We live in a debt-driven economic system that requires constant expansion. Inflation is not an accident. It's a byproduct of how modern economies function. This means retirees are not facing temporary challenges. They are facing structural change. Retirement is being redefined in real time, not as rest, not as security, but as financial management under pressure. If current trends continue, the future of retirement will look very different. More people working part-time into old age, more dependence on investment income instead of pensions, greater inequality between asset owners and savers increased. Intergenerational financial dependency, rising elder poverty in inflation-heavy economies. The divide will not be between workers and retirees, but between those whose assets grow faster than inflation and those whose savings do not. This is the quiet reshaping of society. And most people don't see it happening. Let's bring everything together. It doesn't need to spike dramatically to cause damage. Small yearly losses compound into massive retirement erosion over decades. The less flexible your income, the more inflation controls your lifestyle. Retirees must think beyond nominal returns and focus on real purchasing power. The goal is no longer just accumulating money. It's preserving what that money can actually buy. This mental shift changes everything. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Inflation doesn't announce itself when it destroys retirement security. It doesn't crash markets. It doesn't trigger alarms. It just waits. Year after year. Price after price. Decision after decision. Until one day retirees realize they didn't run out of money, money ran out of power. And by then, time is the one resource they can't earn back. If this opened your eyes, don't let it stop here. Understanding inflation is the first step. Learning how systems work is the second. Protecting your future is the third. Subscribe for deep breakdowns on money, inflation, retirement, and financial survival strategies. Like this video so more people see what most are never taught. And comment below. Do you think retirement is becoming impossible for average people? Because this conversation isn't just about money. It's about what kind of future we're building, and who gets to rest when the work is done.